I logged in to pay the electric bill, but my heart dropped to my stomach. My account was drained. Not a few hundred, but nearly every cent. When I called my dad, he snorted like I was being dramatic and said, "We needed it." That moment, I realized our family reunion wasn't a reunion. It was a trap wrapped in laughter. But they forgot one thing. I didn't just see a zero balance. I saw their fingerprints. My name is Brooklyn Young. I am 33 years old. I have built a life out of turning ruins into sanctuaries and disasters into five-star experiences. I fix things. That is what I do. But as I stood in the middle of Terminal C at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, watching the river of travelers flow around me like water around a stone, I realized that some things are too broken to be fixed. Some things need to be demolished. The notification on my phone screen was polite. It was a simple, automated alert from my banking app telling me that my balance had dropped below the minimum threshold. I frowned. That was impossible. I had just transferred a significant sum from my business holding account to my personal checking account to cover the upcoming property taxes for the Seabriar Lodge and the renovation costs for the new guest wing. There should have been over $45,000 in there. I swiped the notification to open the app. Face ID let me in. The little loading wheel spun for a second that felt like a year. Then the numbers loaded. $12.42. I blinked. I actually rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand, smudging my mascara. Thinking the airport glare was playing tricks on me, I refreshed the page. $12.42. The air in the terminal suddenly felt very thin. My lungs refused to expand. I dropped my carry-on bag right there on the polished terrazzo floor, ignoring the irritated glare of a businessman in a gray suit who had to swerve to avoid tripping over me. I tapped on the transaction history. It was a bloodbath. It was not one massive wire transfer. It was a rapid-fire series of withdrawals and transfers that had started 3 hours ago, right when I was in the air, disconnected from the world. Transfer to R. Hartwell. $5,000. Note reunion reimbursement. Transfer to R. Hartwell. $4,000. Note mom medical. Transfer to R. Hartwell. $6,000. Note house repairs. Transfer to R. Hartwell. $8,000. Note dad. The list went on. It was a scrolling nightmare of my hard-earned stability being siphoned off in chunks that were just small enough to avoid triggering an immediate fraud freeze, but frequent enough to bleed me dry in an afternoon. My hands started to shake. Not a little tremor, but a violent vibration that made it hard to hit the buttons on the screen. I tapped the contact support button for my bank, bypassing the chatbot and hitting the emergency fraud line. The hold music was a cheerful jazz tune that made me want to scream. I paced a small circle around my luggage, my heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the floor. "Fraud department, this is Jason," a voice finally said. "My account," I choked out, then cleared my throat, forcing my voice into the lower, controlled register I used when dealing with difficult contractors. "My name is Brooklyn Young. My account has been drained. I am looking at unauthorized transfers totaling over $40,000. You need to freeze everything, now." I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "One moment, Ms. Young. Let me verify your identity." We went through the security questions. My mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on, the make of my first car. "Okay," Jason said, his voice calm and detached. "I see the transactions. They were initiated via an external transfer link to a verified joint account holder." "I do not have a joint account holder," I snapped. "I have been the sole owner of this account for 10 years. I am showing a link established 12 years ago," Jason corrected me. "A Mr. Rick Hartwell. The authorization was never revoked. The transfers were authenticated using his credentials, which are tied to the account's original legacy permissions." My stomach turned over. 12 years ago, I was 21. I was in college. I had set up a joint link so my dad could transfer me rent money if I came up short, which happened exactly twice. I had stopped using that feature a decade ago. I had assumed, foolishly, that when I upgraded the account type and moved banks for my business loans, the old digital tethers had been severed. He used the old link, I whispered. The system recognizes him as an authorized user, Ms. Young, Jason said. Technically, this isn't third-party fraud. It is a civil dispute between account holders. Freeze it anyway, I commanded. I am revoking his access effective immediately. I want a trace on every cent. I can revoke the access and lock the account, Jason said. But since the funds have already cleared to another domestic bank, we cannot simply pull them back without a fraud investigation proving the access was illegal. Since his name is on the legacy file, that is going to be difficult. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I stared at the phone. Rick Hartwell, my father. I dialed his number. My thumb hovered over the contact photo, a picture of him grilling burgers at the 4th of July barbecue 3 years ago. He looked so normal, just a dad in a stained apron. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Brookie," he said. His voice was casual, cheerful, even. I could hear the television in the background, the roar of a football crowd. "You land yet?" "Where is my money, Dad?" I asked. I did not have the energy for pleasantries. There was a silence on the other end. Not a shocked silence, a calculating one. Then, a distinct sound. He snorted. It was a short, derisive puff of air through his nose. The sound a man makes when he thinks a woman is being hysterical over nothing. "You saw the alert, huh?" he said. He sounded annoyed that I was bringing it up so soon. "Look, don't start panicking. You always panic. You took $44,000 out of my account, Dad," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it locked down. "You drained me. I have $12. 12? We needed it," he said. The phrase hit me like a physical slap. He didn't say I borrowed it. He didn't say I am sorry. He said it with the absolute, unshakable confidence of a man who believes he owns everything under his roof, including his adult daughter's livelihood. "We needed it," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Who is we?" "Why, Dad, that is theft. That is grand larceny." "Watch your mouth," his voice dropped, turning hard. "Don't you dare use legal words with your father. You know how things have been. The reunion cost a fortune. The mortgage. Your brother needs help. It all piled up. We needed it." "So you just took it," I shouted, drawing looks from a family of tourists near the gate. I lowered my voice to a hiss. "You didn't ask. You just logged in and stripped me bare." "You have plenty," he said, dismissive. "I see you posting about your little hotel. I see the renovations. You are doing fine. Brooklyn, better than fine. You are rich. You just don't like to share. You have always been like that. Keeping score." I felt a coldness spread from my chest out to my fingertips. This was not desperation. Desperate people beg. Desperate people apologize. This was entitlement. He spoke as if my bank account was simply the family's emergency reservoir, and I was just the stubborn clerk guarding it. "I have taxes to pay," I said, my voice trembling. "I have payroll. That is not play money. Dad, that is my business. If I don't pay the property tax next week, I get a lien on the lodge." "You will figure it out," he said. "You always do. You are smart. Just move some things around. But don't you dare call me screaming about theft. Families help each other. I raised you better than to be greedy." "Who is we?" I asked again. I needed to know. "Who else is involved in this?" "Stop making this a federal case," he snapped. "It is handled. The family is safe. That is what matters. We will talk about paying you back when things settle down. Maybe in 6 months or a year." 6 months. I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "Dad, I can't operate for 6 days without that capital." "Then you should have managed your cash flow better," he said. He actually lectured me on finance. The man who had just stolen my money was lecturing me on cash flow. "I have to go. Your mother is calling me for dinner. Don't call her and upset her. Brooklyn, I mean it. Let her have a nice evening." Click. He hung up on me. I stood there in the airport. the phone still pressed to my ear. Listening to the dead air, I felt like I had been hollowed out. It wasn't just the money. Money can be earned. Money can be replaced. It was we needed it. It was the complete lack of guilt. It was the realization that to him, I wasn't a separate person. I was an extension of him. I was a resource to be harvested when the season was dry. I thought about the family reunion last week in Gulf Shores, the beach house rental, the massive seafood boils, the way everyone laughed and toasted. I had paid for the rental deposit. I had bought the groceries. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought we were finally in a good place. I realize now that I hadn't been attending a party. I had been attending an audit. They had been watching me pay for dinner, watching me check my phone, watching me exist. Not with love, but with calculation. They were estimating my worth so they would know exactly how much they could take. I looked down at my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button again. I wanted to call back. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I wanted to call my mother and ask her how she could let this happen. But then I stopped. Rick Hartwell had just shown me exactly who he was. He expected me to cry. He expected me to yell. He expected me to scramble and beg and eventually forgive him because family is family. If I yelled, I was just his emotional daughter. If I yelled, I was playing his game. I lowered the phone. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of floor wax and stale coffee. No, I would not yell. I walked over to a row of empty seats near the window. I sat down, opened my laptop bag, and pulled out my MacBook. I did not have Wi-Fi, so I tethered it to my phone's hotspot. I logged back into the bank's website. The balance was still $12.42. It was real. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Evidence. I started typing. Date, time, amount, notes. I was not going to be a daughter anymore. I was going to be a forensic accountant. I was going to be a prosecutor. I was going to be the thing my father hated most in the world, a woman who keeps score. I went through the transaction list line by line, downloading the transfer confirmations as PDF files. Transfer to R. Hartwell, $5,000. Transfer to R. Hartwell, $4,000. I captured the IP addresses listed in the security details. They matched the location of my parents' house in Savannah, but then I saw the last one. It was the final transaction before the account hit zero. It was processed 4 minutes before I logged in. Transfer, $3,500. The recipient wasn't R. Hartwell. The memo line didn't say Dad or reunion. The recipient was C. Galloway Debt Solutions. I froze. I knew my family tree inside and out. I knew my parents' friends. I knew their neighbors. I had never heard of a C. Galloway. I highlighted the name on my spreadsheet. Dad had said, we needed it. He implied it was for the house, for medical bills, for family stability. But family stability does not usually involve wiring $3,500 to a debt collector with a name I did not recognize. I stared at that name, C. Galloway. This wasn't just my father being entitled. This wasn't just him being bad with money. There was a third player on the board. I closed my laptop. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. My father thought he had simply dipped into the family piggy bank. He thought he had taught me a lesson about sharing. He had no idea that he had just authorized the most expensive lesson of his life. I picked up my bag and walked toward the exit. I didn't need to catch my connecting flight. I needed to rent a car. I was going to Savannah to understand why $44,000 felt like a limb being ripped off my body. You have to understand where the first dollar came from. It did not come from a trust fund. It did not come from a lucky scratch-off ticket. It came from sweat, sawdust, and the smell of bleach. My father, Rick, likes to tell people he is a self-made man because he worked his way up to middle management at a logistics firm. But Rick never built anything with his hands. He moved papers. I built my life with a crowbar. It started when I was 16 years old. My grandmother, a woman who smoked slim cigarettes and wore leopard print until the day she died, left me a property in her will. That sounds glamorous. But in reality, it was a terrifying burden. It was a tiny, rotting wooden bungalow on the very edge of Savannah, Georgia. The paint was peeling in sheets like sunburned skin. The porch listed to the left, and the backyard was a jungle of kudzu that seemed intent on strangling the house. When the lawyer handed me the deed, my mother, Denise, actually groaned. She told me to sell it for the land value immediately. She said it was an eyesore. She said, "Brooklyn, honey, get rid of it before the city fines you for blight." My dad was even more dismissive. He stood in the driveway, kicked a rotting tire that was half buried in the dirt, and laughed. He told me to stop dreaming. He said I needed to focus on getting into a state college and finding a nice, safe office job. He called the house a money pit and a trap for a silly teenage girl. But I walked inside. The air smelled of mildew and old cedar. But when I looked past the water stains on the ceiling, I saw something else. I saw original heart pine floors buried under nasty shag carpet. I saw a fireplace that just needed scrubbing. I saw high ceilings and big windows. "It has good bones," I told them. Dad just rolled his eyes and got back in his car. "Bones don't pay the electric bill, sweetheart." That was the moment I stopped listening to Rick Hartwell about money. For the next 6 years, I lived a double life. By day, I was a student, first in high school, and then at a local community college because I refused to take out loans for a university. By night and on weekends, I was a laborer. I worked shifts at a diner, smelling like grease and maple syrup, scraping tips off tables to buy buckets of primer. I worked at a big box hardware store just so I could get the employee discount on lumber. I did not hire contractors because I could not afford them. I learned everything from the internet. I sat on that dusty floor with my laptop tethered to my phone, watching videos on how to rewire a light switch, how to sand floors without gouging the wood, and how to fix a running toilet. My hands were always rough. My fingernails were always short and usually had paint under them. When I went to family dinners, my mother would look at my hands and sigh, handing me a bottle of lotion like a consolation prize. I scavenged. That is a word my family hates. But it is the truth. I woke up at 5 in the morning on Saturdays to hit estate sales and yard sales. I wasn't looking for junk. I was looking for treasure. I found mid-century chairs for $5 that just needed new upholstery. I found heavy brass lamps that just needed polishing. I learned the difference between trash and vintage. By the time I was 22, that rotting bungalow was the cutest Airbnb in the county. It wasn't luxury, but it had soul. I took the photos myself, waiting for the golden hour light to hit the front porch. I wrote the description, selling the southern charm and the historic texture. When the first booking came in, I stared at the notification for an hour, $150 for 2 nights. It felt like $1 million. I didn't stop there. I saved every penny of profit. I didn't buy new clothes. I drove a 10-year-old sedan that rattled when it went over 60. While my friends were going on spring break trips to Cancun, I was buying high thread count sheets on clearance and learning how to fold towels into swans. I graduated with a business degree, but my real education came from the reviews. A 1-star review because the water pressure was low taught me more about crisis management than any textbook. An angry guest complaining about the Wi-Fi taught me about infrastructure. I learned that business isn't about spreadsheets. It is about solving problems before the client even knows they exist. 3 years ago, I made the jump that scared me to death. I found a defunct motel near St. Augustine, Florida. It was a concrete box from the 70s, ugly and sad, sitting on a plot of land that was overgrown but close to the beach. The bank laughed at me at first. They saw a 29-year-old woman with paint on her shoes. But then I showed them the numbers from the Savannah house. I showed them my occupancy rates. I showed them my projection models. They gave me the loan. I named it Seabriar Lodge. I didn't want it to look like a motel. I wanted it to feel like a retreat. I spent 18 months in hell. I dealt with mold remediation, permitting delays, and a roof that leaked every time it rained. I fired contractors who tried to overcharge me because I was a woman. I stood on the roof in a thunderstorm with a tarp, screaming orders over the wind, but I built it. I turned that concrete box into a destination. I created a concept eco-friendly, minimalist, focused on local experiences. I hired a small staff, a manager, 2 housekeepers, and a maintenance guy. I trained them to treat every guest like royalty, and it worked. We were booked solid 3 months in advance. The money started to change. It wasn't just extra cash anymore. It was real wealth. I had operating capital. I had reserves. I had a retirement fund. I was 33 years old, and I was technically a millionaire on paper, if you counted the asset value of the lodge and the Savannah house. But here's the thing, I never told my parents the scope of it. To them, I was just working in hospitality. When I visited home, Dad would ask, "How is the little hotel job going?" in the same tone he would use to ask a teenager about their paper route. "It is fine, Dad," I would say. "Busy? Well, keep at it," he would nod sagely. "Maybe one day you can get into management at a real chain like Marriott. That is where the benefits are." I never corrected him. I never pulled out my phone and showed him that my net quarterly profit was more than his annual salary had been at his peak. Why, it wasn't because I wanted to surprise them one day with a big reveal. It wasn't some cinematic desire to prove them wrong. It was instinct. It was the same instinct that makes a squirrel bury its nuts deep in the ground where other animals can't smell them. I knew my family. I knew that my brother, Ethan, had been finding himself for a decade, moving from one failed startup idea to another, always needing a bridge loan from Mom and Dad. I knew that my parents were terrible with money. They bought new cars they didn't need to impress neighbors they didn't like. They refinanced their house to go on cruises. They lived entirely on the surface. If they knew I had money, real money, liquid money, the dynamic would shift instantly. I would stop being their daughter and start being their bank. The little hotel job was a shield. It allowed me to be just Brooklyn, the girl who was scraping by, the girl who worked hard. It kept their hands out of my pockets, or so I thought. I had built a fortress of financial security. I had insured my buildings against hurricanes, floods, and fires. I had installed security cameras. I had background checked my employees. I had thought of every possible threat to my business. But I had made one fatal mistake. I had left the back door open, a digital back door that I had installed when I was a broke college student, terrified of bouncing a check for textbooks. I sat in the rental car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The road to Savannah stretched out in front of me, dark and empty. I thought about the sweat dripping down my back as I sanded those floors at 16. I thought about the nights I slept on a mattress on the floor of the Seabriar during renovation because I couldn't afford a hotel room. Every dollar in that account was an hour of my life. Every dollar was a sacrifice I had made while they were watching football or buying new patio furniture. They didn't just steal money, they stole my time. They stole the years I spent eating ramen and working double shifts. "We needed it," Dad had said, as if his need for a comfortable illusion outweighed my reality of hard labor. I merged onto the highway, pressing the accelerator. The engine of the rental car whined, but I pushed it harder. I wasn't going to Savannah to visit. I wasn't going to sleep in my old room and eat pancakes. I was going to inspect the damage. I was going to see exactly what my investment had bought them. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Mom. "Denise, your father said you were upset. Please don't be dramatic. Brooklyn, we are family. Just come home and we can talk about it calmly. Drive safe." I didn't reply. I didn't want to talk calmly. I wanted to see the receipts. I wanted to see the new car I suspected was sitting in their driveway. I wanted to look my brother in the eye. I had spent my entire adult life building walls to keep the chaos out, to keep the rot away. I thought I had succeeded, but the rot hadn't come from the outside. It had been inside the foundation all along. The Seabriar Lodge was safe. My staff was paid up for the next 2 weeks, but my personal liquidity was gone. The cushion that allowed me to sleep at night was gone. I turned on the radio to drown out the silence, but I didn't hear the music. All I could hear was the phantom sound of my own voice. 12 years ago. sitting in a bank branch with my dad. "It is just a safety net, Dad," I had said, signing the form that linked our accounts. "Just in case." "Smart girl," he had said, patting my shoulder. "Daddy has got your back." He had my back. All right, he had it right in his crosshairs. The drive to Savannah gave me too much time to think. The highway was a long, gray ribbon unwinding in the headlights, and every mile marker I passed seemed to trigger a memory from last week. I replayed the family reunion in my head, but this time, I was not watching it through the rose-colored glasses of a daughter just happy to be included. I was watching it like a detective reviewing security footage. I was looking for the glitch. It had started with a phone call from my father. Rick, 2 months ago. He was manic with excitement, a tone I usually associated with him buying a new gadget he could not afford. "Gulf Shores," he had declared. "We are doing it right this year. Brooklyn, no backyard barbecue, a real vacation, all the aunts, uncles, the cousins, a big beach house, white sand." I had felt a little flutter of anxiety. "That sounds expensive, Dad." "Don't be a wet blanket," he had snapped, his mood turning on a dime. "We deserve this. Your mother deserves this. Besides, I need you to book it." "Me. You are good with the online stuff," he said, using the same dismissive wave in his voice that he used when he asked me to program the remote control. "Find us a place, something impressive, big deck, ocean view, put it on your card for the points, and we will all settle up with you later." I should have said no right then. Settle up later is the Hartwell family crest. It is Latin for, "You are never seeing this money again." But then my brother, Ethan, had texted me, Ethan, who usually only texted me to ask if I knew anyone hiring or if I could Venmo him $20 for gas. Ethan: "Hey sis, Dad told me about the trip. I know I have been a flake, but I just closed a big deal on some crypto stuff. I want to help. You book the house, send me the receipt, and I will cover half. Seriously, let me step up." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my big brother, who was 29 going on 15, had finally grown up. So I booked it. It was a massive, 3-story stilt house right on the water. It cost $4,500 for the week. I sent the receipt to Ethan. Ethan awesome transferring funds as soon as the bank clears the crypto hold. Thursday at the latest. Thursday came and went. Then Friday. Then the reunion started. When I asked him about it, he laughed, slapped me on the back, and said, "Banks are dinosaurs. Right, it is coming. Don't stress. Money bags." That was the first red flag. The assumption that I could float a $4,000 expense without blinking. The second red flag was my mother, Denise, 2 days before I drove down to Alabama. She called me. She sounded jittery. "Brooklyn, honey," she said, "make sure you bring some cash, just in case." "In case of what? Mom everywhere takes cards." "Just systems go down," she stammered. "And maybe, when you get there, you should give your wallet to your father to put in the safe. You know how things get lost in the sand. You don't want to lose your cards." I found it odd. I was 33 years old. I managed 2 commercial properties. I knew how to keep track of a purse, but I dismissed it as mom being mom anxious, overprotective, irrational. Now, looking back, I realized she wasn't worried about me losing my wallet to the sand. She was worried about who else might get their hands on it, or maybe she was trying to keep me away from it so I wouldn't notice what was happening. I arrived at the beach house on a Tuesday. The humidity was thick enough to chew. The driveway was packed with SUVs. My Aunt Linda, Uncle Bob, and a swarm of cousins were already there, hauling coolers of cheap beer up the stairs. The dynamic was established within the first hour. I was not the successful entrepreneur who had just renovated a historic lodge. I was Brooklyn, the unmarried daughter with the hotel job. We were sitting on the deck, peeling shrimp. My fingers were sticky with Old Bay seasoning and lemon juice. "So," Aunt Linda said, chewing with her mouth open, "still working at that motel. Brooklyn." "It is a boutique lodge, Aunt Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice light. And yes, we are fully booked for the season. Must be hard, Uncle Bob chimed in, taking a swig of beer. Changing sheets for a living. You know, my friend's daughter just got a job at the bank. Benefits, 401k, real stable stuff. You ever think about going back to school? I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I had a deeper 401k than Uncle Bob, who had cashed his out twice to buy jet skis. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull up my business accounts and show them the numbers. But I heard my own internal warning, hide the nuts. Don't let them see. I am happy where I am, I said tightly. Well, as long as you can pay your rent. Aunt Linda sighed, looking at me with pity. Does your dad have to help you out much? I looked at my father. Rick was standing by the grill, holding a pair of tongs like a scepter. He heard the question. He could have corrected them. He could have said, actually, Brooklyn is doing great. Instead, he just chuckled, a low, knowing chuckle. We do what we can, Dad said, winking at Bob. Kids these days, right? Takes a village to keep them afloat. My jaw locked. He was stealing my success. He was claiming credit for supporting me financially while simultaneously spending my money to rent the house he was standing in. It was a power move. By painting me as dependent, he validated his right to control me. If I was a child in his narrative, then my money was effectively his allowance to manage. The rest of the week was a blur of servitude. Because I was the single one without kids, and because I was the organized one, everything fell to me. Brooklyn, run to the store and get more ice. Brooklyn, the Wi-Fi is down. Fix it. Brooklyn, order pizza for the kids. It was constant, and every time there was a bill, Dad was right there. You get this one. Honey, he would say, loud enough for everyone to hear. You are faster with the app. I will tally it up later. I became the designated payer. Pizza, groceries, the boat rental. I was bleeding cash, but that wasn't the theft. That was just the admission price to the Hartwell family circus. The real theft happened on Thursday night. We went out to a massive seafood restaurant. There were 20 of us. The bill was astronomical, of course. When the check came, everyone looked at their shoes. I got it, Dad announced grandly. Put it on my card. He handed the waiter his card. It was declined. I saw the waiter whisper to him. Dad turned red. He made a show of patting his pockets, looking confused. Must be a fraud hold, he muttered. Stupid bank. Brooklyn, handle this for me. I will call them in the morning. I sighed and pulled out my phone. Fine. I opened my banking app to transfer money from my savings to my checking to cover the $600 bill. The app required my PIN for the transfer because it was a large amount, and I was in a new location. The restaurant was crowded. People were bumping into chairs. I held the phone close to my chest, my thumb hovering over the keypad. Here, let me see that receipt, Dad said, leaning over my shoulder. He was close, too close. I could smell the beer and the spicy cologne he wore. I typed in my PIN, 249 I did it fast, but as I hit enter, I glanced up. Dad wasn't looking at the receipt on the table. He was looking directly at my screen. His eyes were locked on my thumb. He saw me look at him. He didn't flinch. He just smiled, a tight, weird smile. Technology. Huh. Amazing how fast you can move money. I felt a prickle of unease, but I brushed it off. It was just a PIN. He couldn't do anything with just a PIN. He didn't have my phone, or so I thought. Later that night, we were back at the beach house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Family photo time, Mom yelled. Everyone on the deck. We all crowded together. My phone is dead, Ethan said. Mine is full, Aunt Linda said. Use Brooklyn's, Dad commanded. She has the expensive one, the one with the good camera. He held out his hand. Unlock it so I can check the lighting, he said. I hesitated. My phone was my life. It had my email, my bank apps, my business contacts, but everyone was watching. The pressure was physical. Don't be difficult. Brooklyn, don't be weird. I unlocked the phone and handed it to him. He didn't take the picture. He handed it to Ethan. "You take it, son. You have longer arms." Dad stepped back into the group, putting his arm around my shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. "Smile, Brookie." Ethan took a photo, then he frowned. "Bad angle. Hold on." He stepped back. He turned away from us, fiddling with the screen. "Ethan, hurry up," I said, my smile fading. "Just adjusting the settings," Ethan called out. He was looking down at the screen, tapping furiously. He wasn't taking a picture. He was navigating. "Ethan," I stepped out of the formation. "Got it," he yelled, turning back around and snapping a quick, blurry photo. He handed the phone back to me. "Great shot." The phone was warm. I took it and glanced at the screen. The camera app was open, but when I swiped up to see the open applications, the banking app was running in the background. I looked at Ethan. He grinned, but his eyes darted away toward Dad. "I just wanted to check the resolution," Ethan mumbled. I looked at Dad. He was beaming at the sunset, looking like the king of the world. I told myself I was being paranoid. The app was open because I had used it at the restaurant. It had a timeout feature. They couldn't have done anything in 2 minutes, but I was wrong. I didn't know it then. But in those 2 minutes, they didn't need to transfer money. They needed to add a device. Or maybe they needed to verify a login for another device, perhaps a laptop sitting open inside the house, waiting for a 2-factor authentication code to pop up on my screen. I remembered the vibration. Just as Ethan handed the phone back, it had buzzed. A short, sharp buzz. The kind of buzz you get when a text message comes in. I checked my messages now. Nothing. But if a verification code comes in via text, and you delete the thread immediately, it is like it never happened. I merged onto the off-ramp for Savannah. The Welcome to Georgia sign flashed past in the dark. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel again. They hadn't just used me for the money. They had choreographed a ballet of distraction. The declined card at the restaurant was the setup to make me open the app. The group photo was the cover to get the physical device. The bad angle was the window of opportunity. "We needed it," Dad had said. They didn't just need the money. They needed the access. And they had worked together, my father and my brother, to pick my pocket while they were hugging me. I pulled up to the stoplight. The red glow filled the car. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was impressed. It was a sophisticated con. But every con has a trail. And they had forgotten one thing. They thought they were robbing a daughter who would cry and forgive them. They forgot they were robbing a business owner who audited inventory for a living. I drove toward my parents' house. I wasn't going to knock on the door. Not yet. I had one stop to make first. I needed to see exactly what we needed it looked like. I needed to see the brand new truck that I was pretty sure was sitting in my brother's driveway. I drove past my parents' house, but I did not stop. The lights were on in the living room. A warm, inviting yellow glow that felt like a lie. I could imagine them in there, Dad in his recliner, Mom on the sofa, maybe Ethan raiding the fridge safe and comfortable, insulated by the cushion of cash they had ripped out of my life. Instead, I drove 3 streets over to the bungalow, my first project, my little money pit. It was currently empty, sitting in a 3-day gap between bookings. I let myself in with the keypad code, the familiar beep 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 click, sounding like a greeting from an old friend. The air inside was still and smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I walked straight to the kitchen island, plugged in my laptop, and prepared to perform an autopsy on my finances. I had the CSV files now. I had the raw data. When I looked at the summary on my phone at the airport, I had seen the damage in broad strokes. Now, looking at the spreadsheet on a 15-inch screen, I saw the methodology. It was not a smash-and-grab robbery. It was a surgical dismantling. I sorted the column by amount. $9,500, $9,500, $9,000, $8,500. I stared at the numbers. Anyone who works in business knows what these numbers mean. Banks are required to report cash transactions or suspicious aggregate transfers over $10,000 to the federal government. It is a standard anti-money laundering trigger. My father, or perhaps my brother, knew this. They had deliberately kept every single transfer under the $10,000 radar. This wasn't panic. This was strategy. A panicked man takes everything at once. A calculating man siphons it in chunks to avoid tripping the alarms too quickly. I highlighted the recipients. About 40% had gone to R. Hartwell. That was Dad. 20% had gone directly to E. Hartwell. That was Ethan. Another chunk had gone to C. Galloway Debt Solutions. But there were others, smaller, stranger transactions that painted a picture of a spending spree disguised as an emergency. I picked up my phone. I needed to understand the mechanics. I called the bank's priority line again. It was late, but my business account status gave me 24-hour access to a human being. I need to understand the authorization channel, I told the representative, a woman named Sarah who sounded tired but competent. I have been the sole proprietor of this LLC for 5 years. I removed my father from my personal checking years ago. How did he move funds from my business holding? Let me look at the back-end structure, Sarah said. I heard the tap-tap-tap of keys. Okay, Ms. Young, here is the issue. Your business account is linked to your personal profile for overdraft protection. And your personal profile, well, it has a legacy association. Legacy association, I asked, my voice tight. It looks like the core customer profile was established 14 years ago, she explained. It was a student joint account. When you opened your new accounts later, they were nested under that original customer ID number. While you removed him from the mailing list and the statement visibility, the joint owner privilege on the root profile was never formally severed with a notarized dissolution form. I felt the blood drain from my face. So he has always had access. Technically, yes, Sarah said. He likely couldn't see your accounts on his main dashboard because they were hidden. But if he logged in using the original joint credentials, or if he called in and verified his identity using that original profile, he could request a transfer. The system sees him as an owner. I closed my eyes. The zombie link. I had been 19. I was moving into a dorm. Dad had gone with me to the bank. Let's set this up so I can help you if you get in trouble, he had said. I had signed the paper without reading the fine print. I had trusted him, and for 14 years. That signature had been a dormant virus waiting for the right moment to activate. He hadn't hacked me. He hadn't stolen my password. He had simply walked through a door I forgot to lock 14 years ago. Can you close it? I asked. Burn it down. Right now. I can freeze everything, Sarah said. But Ms. Young, since he is a joint owner on the profile, the bank considers these authorized transactions. We can open a dispute, but he is going to argue that he had a right to the funds. It is going to be messy. Freeze it, I said, and remove his name from the root profile. I will send whatever notarized forms you need tomorrow. Just stop the bleeding. I hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I looked at the spreadsheet again. They had drained $44,000 in less than 6 hours. I dialed my father again. I didn't care that it was 10 o'clock at night. I didn't care if he was sleeping. He answered on the second ring. I thought I told you to cool off, he said. No hello? Just an immediate command. I am looking at the transaction logs. Dad, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly even. I see what you did. You structured the payments to avoid federal reporting. You kept them under 10,000. There was a pause, a hesitation. I don't know what you are talking about. I just moved what we needed. Don't lie to me, I said. You or Ethan knew exactly where the limit was. You didn't just borrow money. You executed a heist. You siphoned my business capital. It is not a heist when it is family, he snapped. And stop calling it business capital like you are some Wall Street tycoon. It is money sitting in a bank. You have it. We needed it. End of story. It is not the end of the story, I said. I spoke to the bank. You used the old student account link. You used a loophole from when I was a teenager. I used the access I have always had, he shouted, his voice booming through the speaker. I am your father. Brooklyn, I helped you set that account up. I helped you get your start. You think you did all this by yourself. You think that little house you're sitting in just appeared out of thin air. I drove you to the hardware store. I gave you advice. You told me to sell it, I yelled back, losing my composure for a split second. You told me it was a piece of junk. You didn't give me a dime for this house. I gave you the confidence, he roared. I raised you, and now, when we are in a tight spot, you are going to count pennies, you are going to audit your own father. $44,000 is not pennies. Dad, it is to you, he said, and there it was, the resentment, the jealousy. I see your trips, I see your clothes, I see you driving that rental car instead of your old beater. You are flush. Brooklyn, you are swimming in it, and here we are, drowning. I made an executive decision. An executive decision, I repeated, stunned. To steal from me. To redistribute, he corrected. To balance the scales. You are doing well. Ethan is struggling. We are struggling. I took what was necessary to stabilize the family unit. I intended to tell you eventually. I was going to write you an IOU, but I knew if I asked, you would start with your 20 questions. What is it for? Why don't you budget better? You would have lectured me. I am the parent, Brooklyn. I don't get lectured by my child. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This wasn't about the money, it was about the hierarchy. He didn't ask because asking would mean admitting he needed me. Asking would mean shifting the power dynamic, by taking it without permission. He maintained his dominance. He wasn't a beggar. He was a king levying a tax. So you punished me for being responsible, I said quietly. You punished me for having savings. I didn't punish you, he huffed, his tone softening slightly, sensing he had gone too far. I borrowed it. We will pay you back. When Ethan's investments come in, when the house market turns. Ethan's investments. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Ethan hasn't made a profit on anything in his life. Have some faith in your brother, Dad warned. He is trying. I am done having faith. Dad, I am looking for facts. I looked at the spreadsheet again. I see transfers to you, to Ethan, to a debt collector. But there is one more thing. I scrolled to the bottom of the list. There was a pending transaction that hadn't fully cleared yet, but the merchant name was visible in the temporary hold section. It was for $5,000. It was dated today. The merchant was Savage Motors. Dad, I said, why is there a $5,000 charge to a car dealership? Silence, absolute, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Dad. It is necessary transportation, he muttered. You have 2 cars, I said. Mom has the SUV. You have the sedan. The sedan is dying, he said, defensive. The transmission is slipping. I can't drive a death trap. Brooklyn, I have high blood pressure. I need a reliable vehicle. We have to drive to the reunion next year. Don't we? We need something that can handle the highway. I stared at the screen. He stole my payroll money. He stole the money for the property tax. He put my business at risk of a lien, and he used it to put a down payment on a new car. You bought a car, I whispered, with my money, while telling me it was for an emergency. It is an emergency if I can't get to work, he argued. Although I am retired now, I still have places to be. It is about dignity. Brooklyn, I can't show up to church in a car that smokes. Dignity. He stole $44,000 to buy dignity. Who is driving the new car? Dad, I asked, a sudden suspicion hitting me. Is it you, or is it Ethan? The silence returned. Ethan needed a truck for his new venture, Dad mumbled. He is going to do landscaping. He needs a truck for the equipment. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see any more. You bought Ethan a truck, I said flatly. With my money. After he pretended to pay for the beach house and stiffed me. He is going to pay you back, Dad shouted. He just needs the tools to start working. Why can't you support him? I am coming over, I said. Don't you dare, Dad said. It is late. Your mother is sleeping. I am coming over, I repeated. And tell Ethan to bring the truck. I want to see what I bought. Brooklyn, if you cause a scene. I am not going to cause a scene. Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was far scarier than a scream. I am going to cause a foreclosure on your little fantasy. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, my hand resting on the cool granite of the island. I looked around the bungalow I had restored with my own 2 hands. I remembered scraping the old wallpaper off these walls until my fingers bled. I remembered eating peanut butter sandwiches on the floor because I couldn't afford takeout. They thought I was an unending resource. They thought I was a golden goose that they could slice open whenever they were hungry. They were about to find out that I wasn't a goose. I was the wolf they had invited into the fold. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the printout of the bank statement. I walked out of the house. The night air was thick and humid, but I felt cold. Stone cold. I headed for the car. It was time for a real family reunion. I did not drive to my parents' house on Elm Street. That would have been a tactical error. Going there meant walking into their territory, sitting on their couch, and being outnumbered by their shared narrative of victimhood. I needed to isolate the variables. I needed to break the we before I confronted the him. I drove to the north side of Savannah, to an apartment complex called The Pines, which was ironic because the only vegetation in the parking lot was a dead bush and a collection of weeds growing through the cracked asphalt. This was where Ethan lived, or rather, this was where Ethan existed between his grandiose business schemes. I parked my rental car in the shadows of Building C. I did not have to look hard to find the evidence. It was sitting right there in spot 402, gleaming under the sodium streetlights, like a black diamond in a coal chute. It was a truck. Not just a truck, but a tank, a brand new, charcoal gray pickup with oversized tires, a chrome grille that looked like it could eat a compact car, and a dealer tag that was still crisp. It was the kind of vehicle a contractor buys when he lands a $1 million government contract. It was not the kind of vehicle a man buys when he is borrowing $20 from his little sister for gas. I stared at it, $5,000 down. That was my property tax money. That was my safety net. It was sitting on 4 rubber tires, likely depreciating by the minute. I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan, "I am outside. Come down, now." He replied instantly, "It is late. Brooklyn, can't we do this tomorrow? I'm looking at the truck." Ethan, "Come down or I'm calling the police to report a stolen vehicle." It was a bluff, technically. The money was stolen. Not the truck, but it worked. 2 minutes later, the door to the stairwell opened, and my brother walked out. He looked haggard. He was wearing gym shorts and a faded t-shirt, and his posture was a slump of defeat. He walked over to my car. I got out and leaned against the hood. Crossing my arms, I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just pointed at the shiny monstrosity in spot 402. "Nice ride," I said. My voice was ice. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, looking everywhere except at me. "It is not what you think. Brookie." "Don't call me Brookie," I said, "and tell me exactly what it is. Then, because from where I am standing, it looks like you and Dad conspired to wire $44,000 out of my business account, and $5,000 of it went to Savage Motors so you could play construction worker." "I am going to work," Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking. "I have a lead on a landscaping gig. I needed a truck to haul equipment. Dad said it was an investment. He said we had to spend money to make money." "Whose money?" "Ethan," I asked. "Yours," he whispered. "But we were going to pay you back. Honest. Why didn't you ask me?" I stepped closer to him. "If you needed a loan for a truck, why didn't you call me and present a business plan? Why did you steal it?" Ethan looked up then, and I saw a flash of genuine anger in his eyes. It was defensive, ugly, and revealing. "Because you would have said no," he said. "Or you would have asked for a spreadsheet. You would have made me feel like a child asking for allowance. Dad said it was easier this way. He said you have plenty, and you are just tight." "Tight," I repeated. "Yeah, tight," Ethan said, gaining a little momentum. "You have that lodge. You are always renovating. You wear nice clothes, but you never offer. Brooklyn, you come to dinner and you never say, 'Hey, does anyone need help?' You just sit there with your secrets. Dad said you are sitting on a gold mine and letting us rot." I felt the air leave my lungs. I don't offer because I am working, Ethan. I plow my profits back into the business. That is how businesses grow. Well, Dad is drowning, Ethan shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls of the apartment complex. Did you know they are 3 months behind on the mortgage? I froze. What? The house? Ethan said, his anger deflating into misery. They got a notice of default last month. The bank is threatening to foreclose. Dad has been hiding the letters from Mom, but she found one. They are terrified. Brooklyn, they are going to lose the house. I leaned back against the car, trying to process this. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house Dad claimed was his castle. If they are losing the house, I said slowly, trying to make the math work in my head, then why in God's name did you buy a $50,000 truck? Why did we have a reunion in Gulf Shores that cost $6,000? Why did Dad transfer money for reunion costs if he can't pay his mortgage? Ethan kicked at a loose pebble on the pavement. Because of the reunion? That makes no sense, I said. It makes sense to Dad, Ethan said. He knew the family was coming, Aunt Linda, Uncle Bob, the cousins from Texas. If they showed up and saw us struggling, if Dad showed up in his old car with the taped-up window, he couldn't handle it. He said he had to project strength. He said if we looked successful, people would treat us with respect. He bought the truck for me so I would look like I had a career. He rented the big house so everyone would think he was doing well. I felt sick, physically sick. They had stolen my money not to save the house, but to buy a costume. They had used my life savings to stage a play called The Successful Hartwell Family for an audience of relatives who didn't even like us that much. He chose his pride over my security, I said. He chose his pride over keeping the roof over his own head. He was going to use the rest of your money to catch up on the mortgage, Ethan explained. That was the plan. Use some for the show, use the rest to pay the bank. He said it was a bridge loan. He figured you wouldn't notice for a few weeks, and by then he would have figured something out. I noticed in 4 hours, I said. We didn't know you had alerts set up, Ethan admitted. Dad said you were too busy to check. I looked at my brother. He was 29 years old, but he looked like a toddler caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He wasn't evil. He was just weak. He was a satellite orbiting the black hole of my father's ego. You are going to sell the truck, I said. I can't, Ethan said. I drove it off the lot. The value dropped 20% the second I signed the paper. We will be upside down on the loan. I don't care, I said. Park it. Don't drive it. I am dealing with Dad. I turned away from him and got back in my car. I needed to talk to the other half of this disaster. I dialed my mother. She answered on the first ring, which meant she was awake and waiting. Brooklyn. Her voice was wet. She had been crying. Ethan told me about the mortgage. Mom, I said. I heard a sob on the other end. Oh, God. I told him not to tell you. Your father wanted to handle it. Handle it. I gripped the phone tight. He handled it by robbing me. Mom, did you know? Did you know he was logging into my account? I knew he found a way, she whispered. He told me he had a solution. He said he had access to some family funds that had matured. I didn't ask details. Brooklyn, I was just so scared. The bank kept calling. The letters kept coming in red envelopes. I didn't want to lose the house. So you let him steal from me. He said it wasn't stealing, she cried. He said he was just activating resources. He said you would understand. He said, Brooklyn is a good girl. She would want to help her parents. Then why didn't you ask me? I asked the question again. The question that haunted me. If you were about to lose the house, why didn't you pick up the phone and say, Brooklyn, we are in trouble. I would have helped you. I would have paid the mortgage directly to the bank. I would never have let you be homeless. There was a long silence on the line, the kind of silence that is heavy with ugly truths. Because, Mom said, her voice trembling, because then you would know. Know what? That we failed, she said. That your father failed. If we asked you, We would be the charity cases. We would be the poor parents begging their successful daughter. Your father, he couldn't stomach that. He would rather take it as a right than receive it as a gift. He needs to feel like the head of the household. Brooklyn, even if it is a lie. So his ego is worth $44,000, I said. And my trust? He loves you, Mom pleaded. He panicked, and he is jealous. Honey, I have to be honest. He sees you building that lodge, buying property, and he feels small. He feels like he worked for 40 years and has nothing, and you worked for 10 years and have everything. He convinced himself that it was unfair, that you were hoarding it. I was saving it, I said, for things like this, but now it is gone. Please come home, Mom begged. Come to the house. Let's sit down. We can fix this. I am not coming to the house tonight, I said. I am staying at a hotel. I can't look at him right now without wanting to call the police. Brooklyn, don't say that. I will see you tomorrow, I said. Get the paperwork ready, all of it. The mortgage, the car loan, the credit cards, everything. I hung up. I sat in the car in the dark parking lot. I felt hollowed out. My parents had rewritten reality to justify their betrayal. In their version of the story, I was the miserly dragon sitting on a pile of gold, and they were the noble heroes claiming what was rightfully theirs for the survival of the clan. I opened my laptop one more time. I needed to look at the spreadsheet again. I needed to make sure I had caught every leak. I scrolled down past the truck, past the dad transfers, and then I saw it. A transaction I had missed in the initial panic because it was smaller. $800. Transfer to M. Shelby. I frowned. Shelby. We didn't have any Shelbys in the immediate family. Then I remembered. Marcus Shelby. My second cousin on my mother's side. The one who lived in a trailer in Alabama. About 20 miles from where we had the reunion. I hadn't seen Marcus in 10 years. He was a drifter. A guy who showed up at funerals to eat the free food and ask for gas money. Why was my father sending $800 of my money to cousin Marcus? The note on the transaction was blank. We needed it, Dad had said. Did we need to pay cousin Marcus? Was he losing his house too? Or was we even bigger than I thought? A cold suspicion started to crawl up my spine. My father hadn't just used the money for debts and face. He had used it to buy favor. He had dispensed my money like a feudal lord handing out coins to the peasants, buying loyalty and gratitude with currency that wasn't his. I slammed the laptop shut. The hole was deeper than a mortgage. It was a bottomless pit of need, validation, and pathetic maneuvering. And I was the one they had thrown into it to fill the void. I started the engine. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I had a war to plan. I did not go to my parents' house the next morning. Emotional confrontations are messy. Financial audits are precise. I needed to be precise. I sat in the small office at the back of the Savannah bungalow, a room I usually used for storing extra linens. I had my laptop, a pot of black coffee, and a notebook. The first step was containment. I was not just closing a door, I was welding it shut. I logged into every single financial institution that held my name, my personal checking, my business operating account, my savings, my retirement fund, even my PayPal. I changed every password. No more variations of my childhood dog's name. I used a random generator strings of 30 characters that looked like computer code. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. But this time, I set it to an authenticator app on my phone, not SMS text messages. If they managed to clone my SIM card or intercept a text again, they would still be locked out. I called the bank again. I need to confirm the legacy link is severed. I told the fraud specialist. It has been removed. Ms. Young, the voice assured me, the joint profile is dissolved. Your account is now a standalone entity. Good. Now, I want to formally dispute the transactions from yesterday. We can file the dispute, the agent said, but as we discussed, since the authorization was technically valid at the time. File it anyway, I cut her off. Mark it as unauthorized use by a secondary party. I wanted on the record that I did not initiate these transfers. I have the IP logs showing they originated from a location I was not in. I was at the airport. The transfers came from a residential IP in Savannah. I have my flight boarding pass as proof of my location. Okay, she said, typing. I will attach the flight data to the case file. This strengthens your claim significantly. Step 1, complete stop the bleeding. Step 2, assess the structural damage. I called Daniel, a financial attorney I had met through a commercial real estate deal in Florida. He was expensive, sharp, and owed me a favor for referring a big client to him last year. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from prying eyes. I laid the spreadsheet on the table. It is a mess, Daniel said, scanning the rows of numbers. But it is a solvable mess. The problem is the joint nature of the original account. In the eyes of the bank, he didn't steal. He withdrew from a shared pool, civilly. However, you have a case for unjust enrichment and conversion. He looked up at me, his eyes serious behind his glasses. But Brooklyn, you need to look deeper. If he had access to your checking for 12 years, what else did he have access to? That is it, I said. I checked. Did you check your credit report? Daniel asked. Not the score on your banking app, the full 3-bureau report. I have excellent credit, I said. I pay everything on time. That is not what I mean, Daniel said. Identity theft within families is rarely about one account. It is about the identity itself. If he knows your social security number, which he does, and your mother's maiden name, well. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I opened my laptop right there in the coffee shop and paid for a full credit pull from all 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. The report generated in a PDF. I scrolled past my mortgage, my business loans, my credit cards. Then I stopped. Under the section labeled Open Installment Loans, there was an entry I didn't recognize. Lender Quick Cash Online Services, opened 18 months ago, balance $4,200, status current minimum payments made. I stared at the address listed for the loan. It wasn't my address in Florida. It wasn't the bungalow. It was 405 Elm Street, my parents' house. 18 months, I whispered. This isn't new, Daniel leaned in. They opened a line of credit in your name. They have been servicing the debt, making the minimum payments so you wouldn't get a late notice and find out. But the debt is yours. They have been using me as a credit card, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. For a year and a half, this wasn't a panic move because of the mortgage. This is a lifestyle. It is a pattern, Daniel corrected. And patterns escalate. The $44,000 yesterday was just the graduation. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. I had been feeling guilty for considering legal action. I had been wondering if I was being too harsh on a desperate old man. But this was premeditated identity fraud. This was my father sitting at a computer 18 months ago, typing in my social security number to buy God knows what, and banking on the fact that I trusted him too much to check. What do I do? I asked Daniel. You have 2 options, he said. Option A. You go to the police, you file a report for identity theft. We send that report to the credit bureaus and the bank. The debt vanishes from your name, and your father goes to jail, or at least faces felony charges. I looked out the window. I saw a family walking by, a dad holding his daughter's hand. Option B, I asked. Option B. You leverage it, Daniel said. You get them to sign a confession, a legal document acknowledging the debt is theirs, acknowledging the unauthorized transfers, and setting up a repayment plan with strict collateral. It keeps them out of jail, but it gives you an ironclad grip on them. If they miss a payment, you execute the confession and take whatever they have left. They don't have anything left, I said. They are losing the house. Then you take the control, Daniel said. You become the conservator of your own family. You stop them from hurting you ever again. I nodded. Draw it up. Option B. I left the coffee shop and sat in my car. I texted my father. We need to talk. Tonight. 7:00 p.m. The Seabriar Lodge. Bring Mom and Ethan. Do not be late. I chose the lodge intentionally. It was my territory, my achievement. I wanted them to see what I had built while they were busy tearing me down. It was a 3-hour drive, but I knew they would come. They were desperate, and they probably thought I was calling them there to give them a check. I spent the afternoon drafting the trap. I printed out the credit report highlighting the fraudulent loan. I printed the bank logs. I printed the chat logs with Ethan where he admitted the truck scheme. Then, my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Dispute update transaction ID 9982. Status denied. I called the hotline immediately. Why was it denied? I demanded. Ms. Young, the trace shows that a significant portion of the funds, specifically the $8,000 transferred to R. Hartwell was withdrawn as cash from a teller window this morning, the agent said. Once funds are withdrawn as cash, they are unrecoverable by the bank. We cannot reverse a cash withdrawal. That money is gone. He had cashed out. He knew I was coming. He knew I had caught on. So he went to the bank first thing in the morning and physically took the cash. He wasn't sorry. He was doubling down. I hung up the phone and stared at the steering wheel. A strange calmness settled over me. It was the calm of a demolition expert who has just identified the exact load-bearing pillar to blow. They wanted a reunion. They wanted family money. Fine. I was going to give them a financial lesson they would never forget. I put the car in gear and started the drive south to Florida. The Seabriar Lodge was waiting, and tonight, check-in was mandatory. The conference room at the Seabriar Lodge was designed to intimidate. I had selected the furniture myself during the renovation, a long slab wood table made from reclaimed teak, sleek leather chairs that forced you to sit upright, and floor-to-ceiling glass walls that looked out over the dune grass and the darkening Atlantic Ocean. I usually use this room to close deals with vendors or host wedding planners. Tonight, I was using it to dismantle my family's delusions. I arrived 30 minutes early. I set up my laptop at the head of the table. I connected it to the large monitor mounted on the wall, but I left the screen black for now. I placed 3 folders on the table, one for Rick, one for Denise, one for Ethan. I did not put out water. I did not put out coffee. This was not hospitality. At 7 o'clock sharp, the heavy glass door pushed open. My father walked in first. Rick Hartwell was wearing a polo shirt tucked into khakis, his standard casual authority uniform. He looked around the room with a sneer, taking in the modern lighting and the polished surfaces. He didn't see a successful business. He saw a cold, sterile box. A bit dramatic, isn't it? He said, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table. You drag us 3 hours south to sit in an aquarium. My mother, Denise, followed him. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. Ethan trailed in last. He looked sulky, like a teenager sent to the principal's office. But I noticed he was not driving the new truck. At least he had listened to that part of my instruction. Sit down, I said. My voice was calm, amplified slightly by the acoustics of the room. We are sitting. Brooklyn, Dad said, settling into the chair. He placed his hands on the table, interlacing his fingers. He was trying to establish dominance. He was trying to act like the chairman of the board. Now, let's get this over with. Your mother is tired. We have had a hell of a week, thanks to your theatrics. Theatrics, I repeated. Freezing the accounts, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Calling us in the middle of the night, threatening your brother. It is excessive. Brooklyn, we are family. We don't handle things with lawyers and spreadsheets. We handle them at the dinner table. We are past the dinner table. Dad, I said. We are past the point where apologies fix things. We are at the point of forensic accounting. Oh, stop using big words to sound important, he snapped. You are angry. I get it. You have a right to be a little miffed. But let's look at the big picture. I raised you. I paid for your braces. I co-signed your first car loan. I fed you for 18 years. You think that was free? He leaned forward, his face hardening. You owe this family. Brooklyn, You are part of a unit. When one part of the unit is successful, they support the rest. That is how it works. That is the social contract. You don't get to hoard your success while your brother struggles and your parents worry about a roof over their heads. I didn't interrupt him. I let him talk. I let him lay out his entire twisted philosophy. He truly believed it. He believed that my bank account was an extension of his own, simply because he had engaged in the basic requirements of parenting 3 decades ago. Are you finished? I asked. I am finished when you understand, he said. We needed the money. It is not gone. It is just circulated, within the family. Open the folder, I said. Rick sighed, an exaggerated sound of patience being tested. He flipped open the manila folder in front of him. Mom and Ethan did the same. Inside was a single document, the transaction log from the last 48 hours, printed on heavy bond paper. This isn't circulation, I said. This is a raid. Mom looked at the numbers and gasped. I saw her hand fly to her mouth. Rick, she whispered, $8,000 in cash yesterday. Dad didn't look at her. He stared at the paper. I told you. Denise, I had to secure liquid assets before she locked us out. I have to buy groceries. I have to pay the light bill. You took $8,000 in cash, I said, because you knew the bank was tracing the transfers. You wanted to make the money untraceable. I am protecting the family. He slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You were acting unstable. I didn't know what you would do next. I am unstable, I asked. I am not the one who stole $44,000 from my daughter to buy a truck and pay off a cousin. Ethan flinched. Mom looked up, tears streaming down her face. Cousin Marcus? Mom asked, her voice trembling. You sent money to Marcus. He was going to talk, Dad muttered, refusing to make eye contact. He knew about the mortgage. He was going to tell people at the reunion. I had to keep him quiet. So it was hush money, I said. My money, used as hush money. We needed it, Dad yelled, the vein in his forehead bulging. Stop saying stolen, it is family money. I stood up. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate energy of a predator. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to my father. He didn't look up. He stared at the grain of the wood table. I have a question, Dad, I said softly. And I want a simple answer, yes or no. He stayed silent. Did I give you permission to initiate those transfers? I asked. You gave me access 12 years ago, he grunted. That is not what I asked. Did I, Brooklyn Young, authorize you to take $44,000 on Tuesday? I don't need your permission to survive, he spat out. I am your father. So the answer is no, I said. You did not have my consent. Stop acting like a prosecutor, he shouted, spinning his chair to face me. This isn't a courtroom. This is my life. You are treating me like a criminal. Because you committed a crime, I said. And the reason I am acting like a prosecutor is because nobody else in this room is willing to look at the truth. Mom is crying, Ethan is hiding, and you are gaslighting. I walked back to the head of the table. I picked up a second stack of documents. I am willing to offer you a way out, I said. The room went silent. Dad looked at me, wary. I have prepared a legal agreement, I said, sliding a thick document toward him. It is a repayment and admission of liability agreement. Dad looked at the title and scoffed. I am not signing a contract with my own daughter. You will, I said, or I will file the police report I drafted this morning. I watched him stiffen. Here are the terms, I continued, my voice flat and professional. You will return the $8,000 in cash immediately. The truck will be sold, and the proceeds will be returned to me. The remaining balance, roughly $11,000, will be paid back in monthly installments of $500, automatically deducted from your pension check. $500? Dad laughed bitterly. I can't afford that. You can if you sell the boat you never use, I said. And if you stop going to the casino, he glared at me. Is that it? No, I said. There is one more condition. Look at page 3, paragraph 4. He flipped the page. I watched his eyes scan the text. I watched the color rise in his neck. A deep, angry flush that started at his collar and moved up to his ears. This says, his voice shook. This says I acknowledge that the transactions were unauthorized and fraudulent. That is correct, I said. I am not signing this, he said, shoving the paper away. This is a confession. You want me to admit to a felony in writing. I want you to admit the truth, I said. If you sign it, the document stays in my safe. It is insurance. It guarantees you will pay me back. If you don't sign it, then I hand the evidence I already have to the district attorney. You wouldn't, he said. He looked at Mom. Denise, tell her she's crazy. Tell her she can't do this to her father. Mom wiped her eyes. She looked at the document, then at me. She didn't speak. For the first time in her life, she didn't jump to his defense. I am not a thief, Dad roared, standing up. I took care of you, I made you who you are, and this is how you repay me by trapping me, by trying to make me a criminal. You made yourself a criminal when you clicked transfer. Dad, I said. I am leaving, he said. I am not signing this garbage. You can sue me. You can try, but no judge is going to put an old man in jail for borrowing money from his rich daughter. He turned to walk out. He was betting on my guilt. He was betting that I was bluffing. He was betting that deep down, I was still the little girl who wanted him to be proud of her. Sit down, Rick, I said. Go to hell, he said, reaching for the door handle. I found the quick cash loan, I said. He stopped. His hand froze on the brushed steel handle of the glass door. He didn't turn around. The what? Ethan asked, looking confused. What is quick cash? I ran my credit report this morning, I said to the room, but I was looking at my father's back. Someone opened an installment loan in my name 18 months ago. The address on the file is 405 Elm Street. The payments have been made from a distinct bank account that isn't mine. Dad slowly turned around. The bluster was gone. The anger was gone. In its place was something much older and much more fragile fear. 18 months ago, I said. That wasn't for the reunion, Dad. That wasn't for the mortgage. That was just spending. Mom looked at him, her eyes wide. Rick, what is she talking about? It was a small loan, he croaked. His voice was barely a whisper. Just $4,000. I needed to fix the transmission on the sedan. I didn't want to bother you. You stole my identity, I said. You used my social security number. That is not borrowing. That is federal identity theft. That carries a mandatory prison sentence. I hit a key on my laptop. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. It displayed the credit report. I had highlighted the entry in bright yellow. Lender Quick Cash Services, borrower Brooklyn Young, address 405 Elm Street, Savannah, GA. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said. This is a lifestyle. You have been living off my name for a year and a half. The $44,000 wasn't an accident. It was an escalation. Ethan looked at the screen, then at Dad. You told me you fixed the transmission yourself. You said you scraped the money together from a side job. I did it for us. Dad pleaded, walking back toward the table, his hands shaking. I just needed a little breathing room. The credit card bills were piling up. I figured I would pay it off before anyone noticed. But the interest was too high. So you opened a loan in my name, I said. And when you couldn't pay it, you decided to drain my bank account to cover your tracks. I was going to pay it all back, he cried. He looked small now. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a desperate, cornered man. Brooklyn, please, you can't report this. This will kill me. It will ruin me. You are already ruined, Dad, I said. You ruined yourself when you decided I was a resource instead of a person. I tapped the repayment agreement on the table. I am giving you one chance, I said. 1, you sign the paper, you admit to the theft, you admit to the loan, you agree to my payment plan, and you agree to let me audit your finances every month until the day you die. Audit, he whispered. I am taking over. I said. If you want me to save the house, if you want me to keep you out of jail, you lose your financial freedom. I control the mortgage. I control the accounts. You get an allowance. I am the father, he protested weakly, but there was no fire in it. Not anymore, I said. Now, you are a liability. I held out a pen. Sign it, or I call the police and give them the address for quick cash. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. My mother was weeping silently into her hands. Ethan was staring at the table, unable to look at anyone. My father looked at the pen. He looked at the door. He looked at me. He saw no pity in my eyes. He saw only the reflection of his own actions. He reached out his hand. It was shaking violently. He took the pen. We needed it, he whispered one last time, like a prayer to a God that had abandoned him. No, I said. You wanted it, he signed. The ink on the confession was barely dry when the door to the Seabriar Lodge conference room slammed shut behind my father. He had signed the document, but he had not surrendered. I watched through the glass wall as he marched to his sedan. His shoulders hunched, not in defeat, but in the aggressive posture of a man planning his counterattack. He did not look back at the building I had built. He got in his car, and before he even started the engine, I saw him lift his phone to his ear. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was calling the cavalry. My mother lingered for a moment, looking at me with eyes that were swollen and red. She wanted to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps a plea for leniency, but the habit of a lifetime was too strong. She followed her husband. She got into the passenger seat, and they drove away into the Florida night. I sat alone in the conference room. The silence should have been victorious. I had the signature. I had the legal admission of debt. I had secured my financial future, but instead of relief, I felt the air pressure in the room drop, the prelude to a secondary storm. 10 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate. It started with a single text from Aunt Linda. I cannot believe you, evicting your own parents. After everything they did for you, I stared at the screen. Evicting I had just offered to save their home, provided they stopped stealing from me, but the narrative had already been rewritten. By the time Rick Hartwell hit the highway, he had spun a tale of woe where he was the martyr and I was the villain. The phone buzzed again, and again. It rattled against the teak table like an angry insect. Uncle Bob. Your father just called me. He is a broken man. You have plenty of money. Brooklyn. Why do you have to be so cruel? Blood is thicker than water. Cousin Sarah. Mom says you threatened to put Uncle Rick in jail. Are you serious? He is an old man. You are sick. A number I didn't recognize. This is shameful. God sees everything. Brooklyn, honor thy father and mother. I watched the messages roll in. It was a coordinated assault. My father had weaponized the family gossip network. He knew he couldn't win in a court of law, so he had taken the case to the court of public opinion. He had painted a picture of a greedy, heartless daughter who was kicking her elderly parents to the curb over a few dollars. He left out the identity theft. He left out the stolen $44,000. He left out the fact that he had been treating my bank account like a slush fund for years. I didn't reply. I didn't engage. I let the battery drain. Then, Ethan called. I debated ignoring it, but he was a signatory on the agreement. I picked up. You happy now? Ethan asked. His voice was thick, likely from drinking or crying or both. He was in the truck I had effectively repossessed, following our parents back to Georgia. I am not happy. Ethan, I said, rubbing my temples. I am secure. There is a difference. Dad is a mess, Ethan said. He is shaking. You humiliated him. Brooklyn. You made him sign that paper like he is some kind of convict. He is the patriarch of this family. You stripped him of his dignity. I didn't strip him of anything, I said, my voice hard. He stripped himself of dignity when he stole my identity to get a loan from a predatory lender. And tell me, Ethan, whose face is more important? His face, or the law? His pride, or my livelihood? You don't get it, Ethan snapped. It is how it looks. You made us look like criminals. You are criminals, I said. You just haven't been charged yet. Drive the truck to the dealership tomorrow. Ethan, if you don't, I will report it stolen. That is not a threat. That is a schedule. I hung up. The barrage of texts continued. It was suffocating. It felt like the walls of the lodge were closing in. This was the social tax I was expected to pay. In my family's culture, success was a communal asset, but boundaries were a personal insult. By drawing a line, I had declared war on the tribe. I opened my laptop. I logged into my social media accounts. I saw that Aunt Linda had already posted a vague, passive-aggressive status update on Facebook about children who forget their roots and the evil of greed. It had 12 likes and 4 sympathetic comments from other relatives. I could have commented. I could have posted the PDF of the confession. I could have aired the dirty laundry for the entire world to see. But that was their game. That was the game of emotion and noise. I played the game of facts. I composed a single group text message. I selected every contact who had sent me a hateful message in the last hour: Aunt Linda, Uncle Bob, Cousin Sarah, and 3 others. I typed, I see there is some confusion about the situation. I am holding a signed legal admission where Rick Hartwell confesses to federal identity theft and unauthorized wire fraud totaling over $40,000. I also have the bank statements showing exactly where the money went. If anyone would like to see the evidence before judging me, reply yes, and I will email you the full file immediately. Otherwise, please respect my privacy. I hit send. The phone stopped buzzing instantly. It was almost comical. The moment I offered to introduce facts into their fantasy, the moral outrage evaporated. They didn't want the truth. The truth was uncomfortable. The truth meant admitting that their beloved Rick was a liar. It was easier to think I was a bitch than to accept that their brother was a thief. One person, however, did not stop. My phone pinged with a notification from a banking app. It wasn't a text. It was a transaction update. I had set up alerts on the joint monitoring before I closed the loop, and while the money couldn't move anymore, the history was still populating with details I had requested. I clicked on the notification. It was the full detail on the $800 transfer to M. Shelby. I had assumed it was a handout, a gift to a poor cousin. I ran a search on Marcus Shelby in the Georgia Public Court records. It cost me $15 to access the database. I found a judgment against Marcus Shelby from 6 months ago. It was for unpaid child support. The amount he was in arrears was exactly $800. I sat back in my chair. Dad hadn't sent the money to help Marcus buy food. He had sent the money to keep Marcus out of jail. Why? I dug deeper. I looked at the mutual friends on Facebook. I looked at photos from the reunion. There was a photo of Dad and cousin Marcus standing by the grill. They were laughing. Dad had his arm around Marcus. I remembered something Dad had said during the argument. He was going to talk. Marcus knew. Marcus knew about the financial ruin my parents were facing, and my father, desperate to maintain the facade of the wealthy patriarch, had paid Marcus $800 of my money to keep his mouth shut during the reunion. It wasn't charity, it was a bribe. And then I saw another transfer I had missed, $200 to a J. Miller, that was Aunt June, $300 to B. Carter, that was a neighbor of theirs. The pattern crystallized in front of me. We needed it. Didn't mean Mom and Dad needed it. We was a network of people my father wanted to impress or silence. He was using my bank account to play the role of the benevolent godfather. He was solving other people's problems with my money to buy their adoration. He was addicted to the feeling of being the guy who could fix it. He wasn't just stealing to survive. He was stealing to feed his ego. He was distributing my wealth to maintain his status as the big man on campus, while I was the one working 16-hour days to fill the reservoir he was draining. I felt a new kind of anger. It wasn't hot and explosive like before. It was cold and permanent. I wasn't dealing with a desperate parent. I was dealing with a financial parasite who used money to buy love. I picked up my phone and called the credit bureaus again. I didn't just freeze my credit. I placed an extended fraud alert on my file, a step that requires a police report or an affidavit of identity theft to lift. I uploaded the confession Dad had just signed as the supporting document. I was locking the gates. If he tried to use my social security number again, the system would flag him instantly. I was just about to close my laptop when the screen lit up with an incoming email from the bank's fraud department. Subject: additional device information for case 9982. I opened it. Dear Ms. Young, per your request for a forensic trace on the unauthorized login sessions, our security team has isolated the device signature for the initial access point that established the new transfer limits. I leaned in. Device: iPhone 13 Pro. Location: Gulf Shores, Alabama. IP address matched to local rental property router. Time: Thursday, 7:42 p.m. I verified the time. That was the night of the seafood dinner. That was the night my card was declined. But then I read the next line. Authorization method: biometric verification via trusted device pairing. My heart stopped. Biometric verification, Face ID or Touch ID. But Dad didn't have my face. He didn't have my fingerprint. I read the technical note attached at the bottom. Note: the system logs indicate that a secondary Face ID profile was added to the device settings approximately 10 minutes prior to the banking login. This secondary profile was used to authenticate the transaction. I dropped the mouse. They hadn't just looked over my shoulder to get the PIN. When Ethan had my phone for the group photo, when he was adjusting the settings and turning away from us, he wasn't just opening the app. He had gone into my phone's settings. He had added a second appearance for Face ID. He had scanned his own face into my phone. Because we are siblings, we share similar bone structure, but that didn't matter. The phone allows you to add a completely different face as an alternate appearance. Ethan had added his face to my phone. That meant every time he borrowed my phone during the reunion to look up a song or check a map, he had full biometric access to my life. I felt sick. It was so much more violated than I had thought. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a crime of high-tech premeditation. Ethan, the tech-savvy brother, had rigged the lock so Dad could loot the vault. And the worst part? The timestamp on the biometric edition was 7:32 p.m. At 7:32 p.m., I was standing on the deck, smiling for a picture, with my father's arm around my shoulder, squeezing me tight. He was holding me in place so I wouldn't turn around and see what my brother was doing. The hug was the restraint. I stared at the email. The betrayal was absolute. There was no misunderstanding. There was no panic. They had planned it. They had executed it. And they had smiled while they did it. I printed the email. I added it to the file. The smear campaign on my phone had stopped. But the war was far from over. I had their confession for the money. Now, I had the evidence of the conspiracy. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I wasn't going to sleep. I had one more call to make. Not to the bank. Not to a lawyer. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Savage Motors. I knew they were closed, but I needed to leave a voicemail for the general manager. I needed to let them know that the black truck rolling into their lot tomorrow wasn't a trade-in. It was evidence. The morning sun hitting the glass walls of the Seabriar Lodge conference room was blindingly bright, a sharp contrast to the dark, murky waters of my family's morality. I had not slept. I had spent the hours between midnight and dawn drafting a document that was less of a family agreement and more of a surrender treaty. I had called them back at 8 in the morning. I told them I had a solution for the house. I knew that was the bait they could not resist. The fear of homelessness is a powerful motivator, strong enough to bring even a man like Rick Hartwell back to the table he had stormed away from just 12 hours ago. But this time, I was not alone. Sitting in the corner of the room, quietly sipping tea, was Mrs. Higgins. She was 70 years old, wore a floral blouse, and looked like a sweet grandmother. She was also the most ruthless notary public in St. Johns County. I had hired her to witness the execution of the contract. Her presence was the final lock on the cage I was building. The door opened. They filed in. The energy was different this time. Yesterday, there had been anger and bluster. Today, there was exhaustion. They looked like refugees from a war they had started and were currently losing. Dad walked in, his eyes puffy. Mom looked like a ghost. Ethan dragged his feet, looking at the floor. "Sit," I said. I didn't offer pleasantries. I slid 3 copies of a 20-page document across the teak table. The title on the cover page was bold and unmissable: Asset Recovery and Debt Restructuring Agreement. "What is this?" Dad asked, his voice raspy. He picked up the heavy stack of paper, squinting at the legal jargon. "I thought you said you were going to help us with the house." "I am," I said, leaning back in my leather chair. "I am offering you a lifeline, but lifelines come with ropes attached." I stood up and walked to the whiteboard I had set up. I uncapped a black marker. "Here is the reality," I said, drawing a line down the middle. "Option A, you refuse to sign. I take the evidence I received last night. The email from the bank confirming that a secondary Face ID profile was added to my phone at 7:32 p.m. on Thursday, and I go to the police. I file charges for wire fraud, identity theft regarding the quick cash loan, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." The room went dead silent. Ethan's head snapped up. His face went drained of color. He knew exactly what 7:32 p.m. meant. That was the moment he was holding my phone. "Face ID," Mom whispered, looking at Ethan. "Option B," I continued, writing it on the board. "You sign this agreement. I pay the arrears on your mortgage directly to the bank. I bring the loan current. In exchange, I become the lien holder on the property. You will repay me the $44,000 plus interest, deducted automatically from your pension and Social Security. I get full power of attorney over your finances to ensure no further debt is incurred. And most importantly, you acknowledge that any default on this agreement triggers an immediate eviction." Dad stared at the board. His face turned a blotchy red. "You want to own my house," he sputtered. "I built that life. You want to turn me into your tenant." "You are already a tenant, Dad," I said coldly. "You are a tenant of the bank, and you are 3 months away from being kicked out. I am just changing the landlord to someone who actually wants you to have a roof over your head, but I am doing it on my terms." "This is blackmail," he hissed. "You are blackmailing your own father." "I am negotiating with a debtor," I corrected him. "And I don't negotiate with theft. You stole from me. You used my brother to hack my phone. You used my name to borrow money. You lost the right to be the patriarch when you decided to be a predator." I looked at Ethan. "And you?" Ethan shrank in his chair. "I saw the timestamp." "Ethan," I said. 7:32 p.m. Dad was hugging me. "You were adding your face to my phone settings. That wasn't an impulsive mistake. That was a tactic. You practiced that." Ethan looked at Dad, then back at me. "I didn't want to do it. Dad said we needed a way in. He said you changed your passwords too much." "So you hacked me," I said. "Why me? Ethan, why did you target me? Why didn't you try to get a loan yourself?" "Because you have it," Ethan blurted out. The confession came rushing out like vomit. "I saw you pay the caterer for the reunion deposit. You wired $2,000 while we were standing in line for coffee. You didn't even check your balance. You just tapped the screen and it was done. Dad and I were sweating over the gas bill. And you were dropping thousands like it was pocket change." He paused, breathing hard. "I told Dad," Ethan whispered. "I told him. Brooklyn is loaded. She doesn't even feel it. That is when he got the idea. He said if you didn't feel it, you wouldn't miss it." I felt a cold wind blow through my soul. "You saw that I was competent," I said softly. "You saw that I was stable. And instead of being proud or asking for advice, you decided I was a target. You saw I was easy, so you let me be taken. We were drowning." "Brooklyn," Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You don't know what it is like to be 60 years old and have nothing to show for it, to watch your daughter surpass you. It is humiliating." "So you stole my money to buy a truck?" I asked. "To buy back your pride?" "I needed to feel like a man," he roared. "Is that a crime?" "Yes," I said. "It is literally a crime." I looked at my mother. She was staring at Rick. She had been quiet for days, playing the role of the suffering peacemaker. But something in Ethan's confession, or maybe the rawness of Dad's admission, had finally snapped the wire in her head. "Rick," she said. Her voice was low, but it cut through the room. Dad looked at her. Not now. Denise, I am handling this. You are not handling anything, she said. She stood up. She was shaking, but she stood tall. You used our son to rob our daughter. You told me it was a loan. You told me Brooklyn knew. You lied to me. I protected you, Dad argued. I didn't want you to worry. You made me a conspirator, she screamed. It was the first time I had ever heard my mother scream at my father. You made me a thief by association. And now look at us, sitting in a lawyer's room, about to sign our lives away because you couldn't admit you were broke. She turned to me. Her eyes were filled with a profound, shattering shame. Brooklyn, she said. I am sorry. I should have asked. I should have called you the moment the first letter came from the bank. I was a coward. Sign the paper. Mom, I said gently. It saves the house. It is the only way. I will sign, she said. She picked up the pen. She didn't look at Dad. She signed her name on the line marked Debtor 2. She pushed the paper toward Dad. Sign it, Rick, she said, or I'm leaving you. I mean it. I will go live in a shelter before I stay with a man who steals from his children. Dad looked at her. He looked at the paper. He looked at the whiteboard where Option A prison was written in stark black letters. He realized, finally, that he was alone. The we he had used as a shield was gone. It was just him, naked in his greed. He grabbed the pen. He scribbled his signature aggressively, tearing the paper slightly. Fine, he spat. You win. You got your pound of flesh. I hope you're happy. You own us now. I don't want to own you, I said. I just want to be safe from you. I signaled to the corner. Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins stood up and walked over. She placed her notary seal on the table with a heavy thunk. Dad jumped. He hadn't noticed her. Who is she? He demanded. She is a witness, I said, and a notary public, which means you cannot claim later that you signed this under duress, or that you didn't understand what you were signing, or that I forged it. You signed it in the presence of an officer of the state. Mrs. Higgins smiled sweetly at him. ID, please, Mr. Hartwell. Dad looked at me with pure venom. He realized the trap hadn't just snapped shut. I had welded it. He reached into his wallet and threw his driver's license on the table. Mrs. Higgins went through the ritual. She stamped the documents. She had them initial every page. She made it official. When it was done, I took the folder. Ethan, I said, the truck keys. Ethan reached into his pocket and slid the keys across the table. I will handle the return, I said. Whatever gap there is between the sale price and the loan value gets added to your personal debt tab. Okay, Ethan whispered. Get out, I said. They stood up. My mother lingered for a second, looking like she wanted to hug me. But she knew she had lost that privilege. She walked out. Ethan followed. Dad was the last to leave. He stopped at the door. You are a cold woman, Brooklyn, he said. You will die rich, but you will die alone. I would rather be alone than be a victim, I said. Goodbye, Dad. He slammed the door. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 days. I slumped into the chair. It was done. I had the house. I had the repayment plan. I had the legal firewall. My phone chimed. I picked it up, expecting a text from the bank confirming the freeze on their credit. Instead, it was an update from the fraud investigation team regarding the dispute I had filed on the initial transfers. Dear Ms. Young, regarding your dispute for the transaction of $8,000 to R. Hartwell, we have successfully reversed the transfer from the receiving institution before the cash withdrawal was fully reconciled on their ledger. The funds have been returned to your account. I let out a laugh. A real laugh. I had gotten the $8,000 back. He hadn't been fast enough. But then I read the second paragraph. However, regarding the transfer of $9,500 to C. Galloway Debt Solutions, we are unable to recover these funds. The receiving account is a valid third-party merchant, and the funds were immediately dispersed to multiple offshore holding entities. Our investigation suggests this was not a legitimate debt collection agency. but a shell company. I frowned. See, Galloway. Dad had said it was for debt. He said it was for bills, but legitimate debt collectors don't disperse funds to offshore holding entities. Legitimate debt collectors don't vanish. I pulled up the spreadsheet again. $9,500. It was the single largest transfer besides the cash. I typed C. Galloway into a deeper search engine, one I used for vetting international vendors. Nothing came up for a debt collector, but a name did come up in a forum for online gambling scams. Beware of transfers to Galloway Holdings, front for unregulated crypto casinos based in Malta. My blood ran cold. Dad hadn't paid a debt. He hadn't paid a bill. He had gambled it. He had taken nearly $10,000 of my money I worked for, money I bled for, and he had thrown it into a digital slot machine or a sports betting app. We needed it, he had said. He didn't need it for the house. He needed it for the rush. The mortgage was just the excuse. The truck was the trophy. But the gambling that was the sickness. I looked at the document I had just made him sign. It covered the mortgage. It covered the truck, but it didn't account for a gambling addiction. If he was an addict, a repayment plan wouldn't stop him. He would find another way. He would steal from Mom. He would steal from the neighbors. I stood up. The satisfaction of the legal victory vanished, replaced by the grim realization that I hadn't cut out the cancer. I had just put a bandage on it. I wasn't done. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the folder. I wasn't going to let him drive home and spin another lie to Mom about investments. I was going to finish this. I walked out of the Seabriar Lodge. The sun was still shining, but the world looked gray. I had one final card to play, and it wasn't a legal document. It was the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the ugly, gambling truth. I dialed my mother's cell phone as I walked to my car. "Mom," I said when she answered. "Don't let him drive. Pull over. I know where the rest of the money went." I had made them turn the car around. My mother, white-knuckled and trembling, had pulled the sedan back into the circular driveway of the Seabriar Lodge 10 minutes after I called her. They walked back through the glass doors. But this time, I didn't lead them to the conference room. I stopped them right in the center of the main lobby. It was a beautiful space. I had designed it to catch the morning light, with vaulted cypress ceilings and a massive stone fireplace that smelled of cedar and sage. Guests were checking out, pulling their roller bags across the heart pine floors. My father looked impatient. He was tapping his foot, clearly annoyed that his escape had been thwarted by my phone call about the gambling debts. "Why are we standing here? Brooklyn," he snapped. "We signed your paper. We are doing what you want. Can we just go?" Before I could answer, my general manager, a sharp woman named Elena, walked out from behind the reception desk. She was holding a clipboard. She didn't look at my parents. She looked straight at me. "Ms. Young," Elena said, her voice professional and urgent. "The structural engineer just sent over the approval for the new West Wing expansion. He needs your signature on the permit application before noon, and the City Council just called to confirm your attendance at the Chamber of Commerce dinner tonight. They want to present you with the Business of the Year award." I took the clipboard. "Thank you. Elena, tell the council I will be there, and have maintenance check the HVAC in room 4. "Of course, owner," Elena said, a habit she had when we were in front of guests, emphasizing my role. She turned and walked away. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I handed the clipboard back to the desk agent and turned to my father. His mouth was slightly open. He looked from the reception desk to the high ceilings, and then back to me. For years, he had told himself and everyone else that I worked at a hotel. He had diminished my career to a service job to keep his own ego inflated. "You," Rick stammered. "You own this. I bought the deed 4 years ago. Dad," I said, my voice calm. "I designed the renovation. I hired the staff. I signed the checks. I am not an employee. I am the proprietor." He looked as if I had slapped him. The color drained from his face, replaced by a gray, sickly pallor. It wasn't pride I saw in his eyes. It was shame. Deep, burning shame. He realized that he hadn't just stolen from a daughter who had a good job. He had stolen from a woman who had built an empire from scratch, the very thing he had always pretended to be, but never was. "You never told us," Mom whispered, looking around the lobby with wide eyes. "I tried," I said, "but every time I talked about work, Dad asked me when I was going to get a real job with benefits. You didn't want to know. You wanted me to be small so you could feel big." I took a step closer to my father. We were standing in the middle of my success, and he was standing in the wreckage of his failures. "And that brings us to the gambling. Dad," I said, "I know about Galloway Holdings. I know it wasn't a debt collector. It was an offshore betting site." Ethan gasped. "Gambling, Dad. You said it was for the credit cards." Dad looked down at his shoes. The fight had gone out of him. The revelation of my ownership had stripped him of his last defense, his superiority. He couldn't lecture me anymore. He couldn't pretend to be the wise patriarch. He was just an old man who had gambled away his daughter's hard-earned capital. "I thought I could win it back," he muttered. "I was down a few thousand. I thought if I hit one big parlay, I could pay off the mortgage and put the money back in your account before you noticed. I was trying to fix it." "You don't fix a hole by digging it deeper," I said. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw the desperation. And I asked the question that had been haunting me since the moment I saw my balance hit zero at the airport. "Dad," I said softly, "if I didn't have money, if I was struggling, if I was a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, would you have done this?" He looked up. He opened his mouth to speak, to give some excuse about family duty or emergency, but he stopped. He looked at the grandeur of the lodge. He looked at my designer blazer. He looked at the reality of who I was, and he realized the truth. He stayed silent. That silence was the answer. If I had been poor, he would never have touched me. He felt entitled to my money because he believed I had excess. He believed my success was an accident, a surplus that he had a moral right to redistribute. He didn't steal from me because he was desperate. He stole from me because he didn't respect me. "I didn't think so," I said. My phone buzzed. It was the final notification from the bank. "The investigation is closed," I told them. "The bank recovered the $8,000 you took in cash because the receiving bank froze it. But the $9,500 you sent to the casino is gone. That, plus the truck depreciation, plus the quick cash loan that is your debt now. The agreement stands. You pay me back every month. If you miss a payment, I foreclose on the house." Ethan stepped forward. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, and he was twisting the hem of his shirt. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice cracking. "I am sorry. I mean it. I am not just saying it because I got caught. I wanted him to be proud of me." He gestured to Dad. "He is always talking about how you are cold and distant," Ethan said. "He makes me feel like I am the only one who sticks by him. When he came up with the plan, I just wanted to be the good son. I wanted to be the one who helped him save the family. I didn't think about what it would do to you. I was a coward." "Yes," I said. You sold me out for a pat on the head from a man who just gambled away your inheritance." Ethan flinched, but he nodded. "I know. I am going to get a job. A real one. Not a scheme. I will pay my share of the debt. I promise." I looked at Mom. She was crying again, but these were quiet tears. "I knew," she whispered. "Deep down, I knew he had a problem. I knew the money wasn't adding up. But I was so afraid of the fighting. I was so afraid he would leave, or that the family would fall apart. I let him do it because it was easier than stopping him. And that is why we are here," I said. "Because you chose peace over integrity, and now you have neither." Dad finally spoke. His voice was a rasp, stripped of all its boom and bluster. He choked out. "I just panicked. Brooklyn, the letters from the bank, the shame, I panicked." "Panic is an emotion, Dad," I said firmly. Panic does not give you the right to log into my bank account. Panic does not give you the right to steal my identity. Panic is not a permission slip. I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby smelled like fresh lilies. It smelled like clarity. Here is how it is going to work, I said. I am going to help you. I will manage the debt. I will keep the house safe. But the Bank of Brooklyn is closed. There will be no more natural money, no more grabbing the check at dinner, no more borrowing $20. If you need money, you submit a request. You show me the bill. I pay the vendor directly. I will never hand you cash again. Dad nodded slowly. He looked older than I had ever seen him. The illusion of control was gone. He was no longer the head of the household. He was a dependent. And one more thing, I said. I am not going to tell the relatives. I am not going to post the confession on Facebook. I am not going to humiliate you at the next reunion. Dad looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, I said cold. I am not doing it for you. I am doing it because I don't care what they think anymore. But you have to live with it. You have to wake up every morning in that house, look at these walls, and know that you are only there because your daughter showed you mercy you didn't deserve. You have to live with the fact that you broke us. I turned to Elena, who was waiting discreetly by the door. Please show my family out, I said. I didn't hug them. I didn't say, I love you. Those words felt too small, too fragile for the weight of what had happened. I watched them walk out the double glass doors. They moved like strangers. Dad walked a few paces ahead. Mom trailed behind, and Ethan walked with his head down. They got into the old sedan and drove away. I stood there in the lobby of the Seabriar Lodge. My account was still down by thousands of dollars, but the bleeding had stopped. The leak was plugged. I checked my phone. The balance was low, but for the first time in my life, every cent in there was truly mine. Safe, secure. We needed it, Dad had said. He was right. We did need it. We needed this crash. We needed this disaster to burn down the false structures of our family so we could finally see the ashes for what they were. I put my phone in my pocket and turned back to my business. I had a West Wing to build. I had an award to accept. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to look over my shoulder to see who was reaching for my wallet. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on whether you think I was too hard on my family or if I did the right thing. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.